In March 1942, in the Buffalo assembly plant, a test pilot's stark words, "I'm not flying that death trap," echoed the sentiment of many. This was the Bell P-39 Airacobra, a revolutionary design gleaming on the factory floor, yet suffering its fifth refusal that week. It boasted a distinctive mid-engine fuselage, tricycle landing gear, and a devastating nose-mounted 37mm cannon, giving it more firepower than nearly any fighter in production. The design was brilliant in theory. Placing the Allison engine behind the pilot created perfect weight distribution and cleared the nose for the heavy cannon. However, the reality was catastrophic. A long drive shaft connecting the rear engine to the nose propeller caused such severe vibrations that pilots felt like they were sitting on top of a washing machine running at full speed. Worse, the engine's position meant mechanical failure sent fire and metal fragments directly into the cockpit, a terrifying reality compared to conventional fighters, where engine problems happened in front of the pilot. American and British orders were canceled, and American pilots actively requested transfers. The fatal flaw, however, was in the air. The P-39's Allison engine, though powerful at sea level, choked and wheezed above 12,000 feet. This wasn't a minor inconvenience, it was a death sentence in the high-altitude war against German Messerschmitts, which cruised comfortably at 25,000 feet. Colonel Bruce Holloway's scathing assessment in early 1942 called the aircraft fundamentally unsuited for the high-altitude interception role for which it was designed, citing an inadequate ceiling and dangerous handling at altitude. In a rational system, the program should have been killed. But this was wartime. Canceling the P-39 meant shutting down an entire manufacturing operation and losing months, possibly years of production time. So the factories in Buffalo kept running, building hundreds of aircraft that nobody wanted, which were soon left gathering dust in storage fields across the country. The unexpected solution came from the desperate Eastern Front. The Soviet Union, reeling from the German invasion, urgently needed any aircraft. Through the Lend-Lease program, the United States began shipping military equipment, including the hundreds of unwanted P-39 Airacobras. American officials viewed this as a convenient way to dispose of an embarrassing mistake, privately hoping the Russians could find some use for the fighters they couldn't. The long, roundabout journey saw the disassembled aircraft shipped across U-boat-infested waters, overland through Iran, and finally into southern Russia by late 1942. Soviet pilots, however, approached the Airacobra without prejudice. The air war over the Eastern Front was primarily fought below 10,000 feet. Brutal, chaotic, low-level combat against dive bombers and tanks. In this thick air, where German fighters often operated at lower altitudes, the Airacobra's Allison engine performed beautifully. Pilots accustomed to the underpowered wooden fighters of the time found the Airacobra a revelation. The 37mm cannon could destroy a German bomber with a single shot, and the Airacobra's sturdy construction absorbed battle damage that would have torn apart their fragile domestic fighters. The cultural difference in evaluation was immediate. Senior Lieutenant Grigory Rekalev's 1942 assessment noted the machine was heavy but solid, adding, "It does not climb well, but it dives like a stone. The cannon is magnificent." This philosophy, rewarding aggression and punishing hesitation, became the foundation of Soviet Airacobra tactics. They used its strengths, attacking swiftly with the devastating cannon and breaking away, transforming the flying coffin into a lethal predator. The pilot who truly mastered the aircraft was Alexander Ivanovich Pokrishkin. Transitioning to the P-39 in early 1943, he developed the formula for air combat, a methodical approach emphasizing altitude advantage, speed management, and precise gunnery. His pilots would patrol at medium altitude, dive with tremendous speed onto German formations, fire a brief burst from the 37mm cannon, and zoom climb away before the enemy could react. The tactic was devastatingly effective, and Pokrishkin's personal score soared. By the Battle of Kursk in July 1943, he was the Soviet Union's leading ace, and his P-39 unit was one of the Red Air Force's most effective regiments. German pilots recognized his radio call sign, with Achtung Pokrischken in der Luft becoming a common warning. His regiment claimed over 100 German aircraft destroyed in the first week of Kursk, with the P-39's heavy armament proving particularly effective against slow Junkers UU-87 Stuka bombers.
Reports of the P-39's success filtered back to American intelligence. Initially met with disbelief, the same aircraft American pilots rejected was one of the most effective fighters in Soviet service. The evidence was undeniable when Soviet Lend-Lease requests specifically asked for more P-39s, rejecting the offer of P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts. By 1944, thousands more were shipped, and Soviet aces like Pokrischken, who ended the war with 59 confirmed kills, primarily in the P-39, achieved scores rivaling the best Allied pilots. The dramatic difference came down to operational environment and tactical philosophy. American doctrine emphasized high-altitude bomber escort, the role the P-39 miserably failed at. Soviet doctrine emphasized low-altitude ground attack and tactical air superiority, a mission for which the P-39 was nearly perfect. Back in the U.S., Bell Aircraft's engineers absorbed the contradictory lessons. The failures exposed critical design flaws, but the successes validated innovative concepts. The tricycle landing gear proved superior, reducing accidents and making the aircraft easier to handle. The concept of a heavy, slow-firing nose-mounted cannon was validated. The P-39's basic layout was refined into the P-63 King Cobra, featuring a more powerful engine and improved aerodynamics, which was also sent in large numbers to the Soviet Union. More importantly, the P-39's design choices influenced the next generation of American fighters. Tricycle landing gear became standard, and pilot visibility became a priority. When Lockheed's Kelly Johnson designed the P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter, it bore striking similarities to the P-39, featuring tricycle gear and placing the engine behind the pilot. The P-80, which took the P-39's good ideas and eliminated its flaws, represented the evolution driven by the hard lessons learnt from the failed design. The P-39's high-altitude failure forced engineers to understand the critical importance of engine supercharging, and its Soviet success proved there was no single definition of an effective fighter. More than 4,700 P-39s, nearly half of all produced, were delivered to the Soviet Union, flying from Stalingrad to Berlin and racking up thousands of victories. The production lines in Buffalo finally shut down in 1944 after producing 9,584 aircraft. The workers unaware their flying coffins were helping turn the tide of the largest land war in history. The story of the P-39 Airacobra reveals that success and failure are context-dependent. The engineers who designed the aircraft never intended to create a controversial failure, yet their innovative choices contributed directly to the foundation of American jet aviation. The tricycle landing gear, the emphasis on pilot visibility, and the lessons on design balance, hard-won principles purchased with the embarrassment of rejection and the glory of Soviet victories, all flowed into subsequent designs. The fighter that nobody wanted ended up teaching American aviation designers everything they needed to know. By 1947, when the North American F-86 Sabre, America's premier jet fighter of the Korean War, took to the skies, it carried the DNA of the despised P-39. The aircraft, dismissed as America's worst fighter, contributed more to its aviation development than many celebrated designs.